Hello, Prof. Aminuddin and everyone. My name is Sun Xingqi, Master of Education. Today, I'm going to introduce my research proposal, the relationship between students' critical thinking disposition and academic performance at Beibu Gulf University. First, we will start it from Chapter 1, Introduction. The background is the rapid growth of the Internet has greatly accelerated the speed of information dissemination and facilitated people's access to information. Everyone can become an information producer and disseminator, thus forming an era of information explosion. A great deal of information includes both good and bad. People cannot receive all of them. They must learn to analyze, judge, and select information. Cultivating critical learners has become one of the primary goals of 21st century education. In Western countries, Harvard University, Columbia University, and some other universities started to adjust their undergraduate education strategies and began to focus on cultivating students' critical thinking. UNESCO in 1998 established the cultivation of critical and independent attitudes as one mission of training and researching in higher education. In China, the document of core competence and values for Chinese students' development put forward the main points, which include interpretation and clear requirements for rational thinking, critical questioning, and scientific spirit. Next is problem statement. In China, only a few colleges and universities have recognized and carried out critical thinking education. Up to 2013, there are less than 50 universities offering critical thinking courses. China has always been adhering to the traditional teacher-centered teaching model, which put less emphasis on critical thinking. The essence of the current education system is examination-oriented, which usually sees improving students' ability of taking examinations as the main task and take students' grades seriously. The rigid and outdated ideas lead to the single thinking, which greatly kills students' creativity and turns them into exam-taking machines without their own ideas, unable to achieve all-round development. Below are objectives. First is to determine the level of students' critical thinking disposition. Second is to determine students' academic performance. Third is to determine the relationship between students' critical thinking disposition and academic performance. Fourth is to determine the correlation between truth thinking, open-mindedness, analyticity, systematicity, self-confidence, inquisitiveness, cognitive maturity. Next is research question and research hypothesis. There are two research questions. The first is, what is the level of students' critical thinking disposition? Second is, what is the level of students' academic performance? There are three research hypotheses. First one is, there is no significance relationship between the level of students' critical thinking disposition and the students' academic performance. Second is there is no significant correlation between truth thinking, open-mindedness, analyticity, systematicity, self-confidence, inquisitiveness, cognitive maturity, and students' academic performance. Third one is there is no significant difference of students' critical thinking disposition among gender. Next is the significance of study. Previous studies have focused on the development of students' critical thinking in the primary education stage. These researchers believed that students in primary school or earlier have strong curiosity and rich imagination, and they are in the stage of rapid mental development with strong plasticity. These are conducive for students to start to develop critical thinking earlier, where in this study, the subjects are university students who generally have the typical characteristics of mastering rich knowledge but insufficient ability. Their mind has already developed mature, and their thinking has been basically stereotyped. Previous studies have focused on the relationship between students' critical thinking and other specific subject abilities and or teaching models. While this study combines the national conditions of China with the development of students' critical thinking. Next is the limitation of study. The latest data released by the Ministry of Education of China in 2020, there are 3,005 colleges and universities in China, where this research is located in one of the universities. Therefore, the research result can't be extended to a wide area. In addition, the research method only uses the survey method, and there are only 5 options of items for participants to choose. It has some limitations in comprehensively measuring students' critical thinking disposition. Next is the definition of terms. Critical thinking disposition is a measure of the tendency towards critical thinking. In this study, critical thinking disposition refers to a kind of spiritual temperament that modern innovative talents must possess. A critical thinker may have the following characteristics: open-minded, independent, confident, willing to think, not blindly following authority, respecting science and others, striving for objective work. Academic performance, also known as academic achievement. It is the student's measurable and observable behavior during a specific period of time. This study used CGPA as a reference for students' academic performance. Next, I am going to talk about the Chapter 2, Literature Review. It has 3 parts: theoretical perspective, empirical evidence, and conceptual framework. Theoretical perspective can be divided into 4 parts: the theory of critical thinking, the theory of critical thinking disposition, the measurement of critical thinking disposition, the implication of critical thinking on students' development. Next is the theory of critical thinking. In Western theory, Critical thinking originated from Socrates' probing questioning method, which used the dialogue, discussion, and heuristic education methods. Critical thinking is to make everyone have questions, be cautious, and explore their own ideas boldly. Critical thinking is the process of making judgments in a self-regulatory and purposeful way. Critical thinking is self-directed, self-disciplined, self-monitored, and self-corrective thinking. In Chinese theory, critical thinking is a conscious review of a certain point of view and behavior. Critical thinking is to trace back to the root of all problems and make reflective or forward-looking thinking. Next is the theory of critical thinking disposition. A two-dimensional structure model of critical thinking includes cognitive skills and affective dispositions. Critical thinking could represent the quality of thinking from the perspective of skills and reflect the modern humanistic spirit from the perspective of temperament. Critical thinking is a collection of skills and attitudes that has no disciplinary boundaries. Critical thinking disposition is an intrinsic motivation for solving problems and making decisions through the use of critical thinking. Critical thinking disposition is an attitudinal concept, and it may take longer to develop than critical thinking skills. The level of disposition will affect critical thinking to a certain extent. The lower level of disposition is less likely to make critical thinking meaningful, whereas a higher level of disposition is more likely to contribute to deal with problems, make solution and decision. Next is the measurement of critical thinking disposition. Fisher et al. In 1995 created the California Critical Thinking Disposition Inventory. The reason for the design of this inventory is derived from the characteristics of affective disposition and the critical thinker proposed by Delphin Report. The Hong Kong Polytechnic University has translated and revised CCTDI, making it the only testing tool with a Chinese version, which was called CCTDI-CV. Next is the implication of critical thinking on students' development. Students' critical thinking is a critical standard to measure the quality of talent cultivation, and it is an important focus of today's education reform. Critical thinking is the foundation of innovative thinking, and the students' critical thinking reflects their creativity to a large extent. The cultivation of critical thinking is not in opposition to the improvement of students' performance. People should realize that the cultivation of critical thinking can improve students' ability of induction, deduction, analysis, reflection, and systematic thinking, which will not hinder their achievements, but will enable them to achieve great development. Next is empirical evidence. Petito and Soto in 2019 is to determine the associations between critical thinking and academic performance among undergraduate dental hygiene students. The sample is 45 undergraduate students. It adopted CCTDI to measure students' critical thinking. and use the GPA to represent the student's overall academic and clinical performance. The finding is the disposition has no significant correlation with academic performance. Liu in 2018 is to explore the relationship between critical thinking and student reading performance. The sample is 59 primary school students. It used the critical thinking disposition inventory to measure the scale of disposition. It used the Chinese and English reading test papers in 3 examinations to represent students' achievement. The finding is the level of students' critical thinking disposition is significantly positive related to their reading scores of Chinese and English. Huang in 2019 is to study the relationship between critical thinking and the students' English reading level. The sample is 44 middle school students. It used the critical thinking disposition questionnaire to measure students' critical thinking disposition and used English reading proficiency test to present students' English reading level. The finding is critical reading can improve students' reading level. Here is the conceptual framework. Critical thinking disposition is an independent variable. It has 7 dimensions, and the dependent variable is students' academic performance. The 7 dimensions includes truth thinking. It refers to an objective and sincere attitude of searching for information. They don't care if the answer is compatible with the original personal opinions or even contradictory to personal views or affects their own interests. Open-mindedness refers to a tolerant attitude towards different opinions in order to avoid the possibility of personal bias. Analyticity refers to the ability to identify the issue, understand the crucial causes, and predict consequences based on the evidence. Systematic refers to an organized and targeted effort to deal with problems. Self-confidence refers to a good grasp of one's ability of rational analysis. Inquisitiveness refers to an attitude to be curious and enthusiastic and try to learn more knowledge, even if the actual value of knowledge cannot be seen clearly and directly. The 7th is cognitive maturity. It refers to carefully making a judgment or not making judgment temporarily or modifying existing judgment. Chapter 3, Methodology. For research design, it uses quantitative research method. For population and sampling sets, the sampling technique is convenience sampling. The population is all students at Beibou Gulf University. The sampling size is 377, based on Cranchi and Morgan. For the data collection procedure, it adopts online survey questionnaire. For data analysis procedure, it used IBM's past statistic Vero 26.0, and it used descriptive statistics, comparing between the 7 dimensions, and used Pearson correlation analysis independent sample t-test. The instrument is based on the Chinese version of California Critical Thinking Disposition inventory. Some adjustments and deletions are made according to Chinese culture and translation habits that make students easy to understand. It includes 7 dimensions. Each dimension has 8 atoms. The total atom is 56. It adopts 5-point Likert scale. Some atoms adopt forward scoring. Disagree equals 1. Agree equals 5. Some atoms adopt reverse scoring. Agrees equals 1. Disagree equals 5. Let's look at the description of scoring. For example, for truth thinking, the atom number of forward scoring is 9. The atom number of reverse scoring is 1 to 8. For open-mindedness, the atom number of forward scoring is 9, 10, 13, and the atom number of reverse scoring is 11, 12, 14, 15, 16. That's so on. That's all my presentation. Thank you, everyone.